Welcome back to another great episode of the C J Speedway Review. My name is Chris Burns from the Loki and Jabroni Show, coming at you live, streaming every Tuesday night, falling into your eardrums every Thursday on iTunes, Google Play Music, or wherever you steal your favorite podcast from. Across the screen from me and just up the highway is Corey Huffnagel. Corey, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. I'd probably say this past weekend was pretty wild, and it was really exciting, and now I'm already excited for the next round, and this is going to be very interesting, to see who the four drivers are going to be for the championship four. But other than that, it's going to be very exciting coming up this weekend at Martinsville.
A lot of excitement going on at Kansas for both series. But first, before we go any further, I must tip my hat to you and the New England Patriots for basically just doing what you do, and that's playing Patriot football. Eddie and I were talking about it last night on the Loki and Jabroni Show live feed, is how many missed opportunities Matt Ryan had and just didn't capitalize. And if you don't put your foot on the throat of the Patriots, they're going to do exactly what they did Sunday night, and they're going to show you how to handle those mistakes and how to win a football game. So big ups to you. You made the right call. Wasn't exactly as close as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was going to be a close game, but other than that, a win's a win, and, it's how it is.
Exactly. They don't ask how you win, they ask if you win. And speaking of which,
right,
let's talk about Kansas. We had the Xfinity Series lead off the weekend. We both looked at this race as a make or break for a lot of drivers, and I know I'm looking at my picks right now from last week. I had Christopher Bell as my sleeper because, again, he's moving up to the Xfinity Series full-time next year. I wanted him to do well. What I didn't think was going to happen is that, A, he'd win the race. I'm glad he did. And B, that he would cause as much controversy as he did in winning the race.
I mean, the thing about it is, and also congrats to Christopher Bell as well. But, I mean, I looked at that race. I mean, I actually picked him as a dark horse for that race on Saturday. But there was actually no doubt in my mind that, he was in really good equipment. And, of course, he was racing for Joe Gibbs as well. And anytime you race with that team, there's no doubt, whether if you're in, Xfinity or in the Cup Series, you're going to be able to win races. But going back to Saturday, I would have to say, the last 10 laps, he was catching Eric Jones, by a half a car length, and he was running them down lap after lap after lap. And I would say with 3 laps to go, he made that move on the inside. It was kind of like a dirt track move, something that you see at Eldora. So I thought to myself, okay, he's going to make a really good pass on the inside, and take the lead from there. But what I actually noticed was that as he was coming up, I think he, in my opinion, he kind of got loose. And then you can basically see that he was slowing down just a little bit. And then here comes Eric Jones, on the high side. He basically just rammed right into the back of him. And I could pretty much tell when I saw that, I said, okay, there's pretty much 2 things that's going to happen. Either A, Eric Jones is going to be upset, because, he pretty much cut him off, after he made that slide job. And B, there's going to be a little bit of a meeting with those guys, on Monday or something like that. And you could pretty much tell in Eric Jones's interview, he said that, this isn't dirt track racing, he couldn't stop coming up on the corner. But all I could just say is, a win is a win for Christopher Bell. And I really think that this is going to be a kid that, that's going to be a one to watch in the Xfinity Series next year, now that he's going to be in really good equipment. And do I think, he could be a championship contender next year? I mean, it's possible. I mean, we've actually saw 2 drivers that have won the championship in their first full season. I mean, you go to 2014 when Chase Elliott won the Xfinity, which was then nationwide. And then, of course, in 2015, Eric Jones won the Truck Series championship in his first full year. So, but I would probably say with Christopher Bell, I mean, this is going to be his first full season in Xfinity. So it's going to be a lot different, because now that he's going to be racing with a lot of the Cup guys. But on the other hand, I do expect him to win a couple of races this year, no matter what number he's going to be driving. So I think it's going to be really good for him next year. And I do expect him, to be the one to watch.
Absolutely. I have no argument with that. I just want to read the quote from Christopher Bell on NASCAR.com. Quote, "I never want to wreck anybody, especially my teammate. I don't know. What I do know is my spotter said clear, and I drove in real deep. I felt that I cleared him. I don't know. It's my first win, and I'm sorry that Eric didn't finish the race, but man, am I stoked. This thing was awesome. Be able to win the Xfinity Series is something I've dreamed about since I was a kid. We were both on old tires. We were both sliding around. I'm bummed for the way it finished, but I'm glad it held on. I was getting tire smoke in the car the last couple laps, and I was worried we weren't going to make it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at that, of course, like I said earlier, his car kind of got loose when he was coming off the corner. And I think what happened was, when he was going down that white line, I think his car kind of pushed up on the top just a little bit. And you could pretty much tell that he went into the corner pretty deep. And, like I said, it was kind of like a dirt track move, but with all honesty, you never want to wreck your teammate, for the win. And especially, with Erik Jones, who literally had the most dominating car, on Saturday, which I really thought he was going to have a shot to win. But there's actually, some other opportunities, for Erik Jones to win. I mean, he's only had 2 wins this season. I mean, he could have won probably maybe 3 or 4. So.
Right. And I'm watching the replay of it now, and I've seen this replay about 6 or 7 times. It doesn't look, and again, he's talking about being on old tires. He just got way up the racetrack. I think the thing that saved him is that Erik Jones was right there.
Yeah.
If that car slides a few seconds later or a few seconds earlier, Jones blows right by him.
Yeah.
And takes the race. But again, as I'm watching this replay, now I'm going to watch it for the 8th time. He comes off the bottom line. He just woes way up the racetrack, way too fast. That's not a move. Like you said, it's a dirt track move. But I don't think it was intentional at all. I know the hubbub has been out there for 6 or 7 days now, however long it's been, 5, 6 days. I'm old, man. My time clock goes way haywire. But I don't think it was anything intentional, anything malicious. I can understand from Erik Jones's point of view, and I'm sure once everybody saw the replays Saturday afternoon, that cooler heads prevailed, and they were able to sit down and go, okay, I see what you're talking about, or it takes on a different light when you actually see it in front of your own very eyes.
Right. Absolutely.
So not that wasn't the most controversial thing of the weekend, and we're going to get to more of that as we go along. I do want to go back to the standings and to the finishing results for the race. As we said, Christopher Bell was first. Tyler Reddick was the pole sitter. He came in second. Ryan Blaney third. William Byron fourth. Justin Allgaier fifth. Austin Dillon sixth. Elliott Sadler seventh. Matt Tifft 8th. Ty Dillon 9th. And Ryan Reed was in 10th. We'll go down the list and pick out some notables. Brennan Poole in 12th. You had Brennan gone 13th. Erik Jones, unfortunately, finishes 15th in that race.
Yep.
Custer, disappointing 19th. Spencer Gallagher, 21st. And I'm going way down the list to try to find – there he is, Gray Galding, 39th. A lot of really good drivers, much like last week with the Talladega race for the Cup. This was a race where a lot of the strong contenders with a top spot, but you still had enough in the top 10 and say it's the usual suspect, your championship guys.
And I'm looking at, the guys that are below the top 10 or so. I'm looking at guys like Daniel Hemrick. He had probably a really good shot at finishing in the top 5. There was one point in the race where he had that pit road penalty where, of course, the rule is you can't change the old tire and put the new tire on. So that was a 1-lap penalty for him. And then you go to Cole Custer, which I thought, he was going to be one of the odds-on favorites, to win the race on Saturday. And then, of course, he cuts down a tire, I think, near the end of the race or so forth. But if you look at the standings right now, I mean, you're basically looking at, the guys, between, 4th and 8th. I'm looking at Custer. He's, way deep, on the cutoff line. And, of course, Henrik, is on the cutoff line as well. But then you go on the other side, you still got the Junior Motorsports guys that finished in the top 5. You got Byron, who finished 4th, Allgaier 5th, and Sadler 7th. So, and I probably say with this next round coming up, I really think that, this is going to be pretty much all 3 of the Junior Motorsports, that are going to advance, based on whether winning or probably going to point themselves in. But this is going to be very interesting to see how this is all going to shape up. And I would probably say that 4th and final spot, it's going to be, odds on, who's going to grab that spot, whether if it's going to be either Gibbs or Childress or Ganassi or anywhere else.
Well, the points have separated a bit now that we're coming to the end of this particular round with these guys. Let's look at the difference between Cole Custer in 8th and Brennan Poole in fourth, only a matter of 8 points.
Right.
I mean, this is really an exciting, close battle. And even if you consider, like we're going to talk about with the Kansas race for the Cup Series in fall, with just a few small problems, Justin Allgaier is by no means in the catbird seat in this division right now.
There's no question about it. I mean, I look at the first three guys in the points. I think it's just going to be all Junior Motorsports the way as it looks like it. And if you look at the points, I mean, it's going to be really, really close. By the time we get to Phoenix in a couple weeks, and it's going to be a lot of different scenarios. One can probably make themselves in on a win. One can probably point themselves in. Depending on what the other guys do in the race. But I mean, like I said, I've actually been thinking the last couple of weeks, and to be honest, I can't even tell who my fourth guy is going to be in the Final Four. I mean, it's pretty hard to choose, the way you look at it.
And with a battle this close, I wouldn't even try to guess who any of the top four are going to be. And like we found out with the Cup Series in just a few minutes, anything can happen and will happen and could happen. And you and I were texting back and forth during the Cup race. This guy's got a problem. This guy's got, and we're watching the points pylon just completely, flip over and over and over again.
Right.
Until we finally got the word of certain people having their problems and being done with it. So I'm going to give you the top 8 right now as we go to the end of our Xfinity talk. Sitting in 8th, 36 point back, is Cole Custer. Daniel Hemrick, 7th, 34 points back. Ryan Reed in 6th, 34 points back. In 5th is Matt Tifft, 33 points back. Brennan Poole, 4th, 28 points back. Elliott Sadler, 3rd, 11 points back. William Byron, 2nd, only 2 points back. And our leader is Justin Allgaier. So again, with the Xfinity guys having the week off, I'm sure there's going to be lots of strange things going on in the garage. How are we going to get an advantage here, there? How can we get more speed underneath us? And they're going to Texas next.
Yeah.
Which is a track that, much like Kansas, carries a lot of speed. It's not going to be a fuel mileage race. It's going to be, especially now, I think fuel mileage races are really a thing of the past because of the stage racing system.
I really think it is, and if you go to the mile and a half racetracks, I mean, that's going to be one of the races where I do expect the Junior Motorsports guys to be really strong and the ones to beat. I mean, I'm looking at the results back from the race in April, and you had a couple of the Xfinity regulars finish in the top 10. Of course, Cole Custer having that top 5, and then Bubba Wallace, who was then driving for Jack Roush, but then his team got succeeded or whatever it was. And then you got Byron 7th, Matt Tifft 9th, and Elliott Sadler 10th. So, I mean, going back to Texas the second time, it's going to be very interesting to see how this all plays out. But the difference is going back to now instead of back in April, you're not going to have a lot of the big Cup guys, because in the race back in April, you had Eric Jones, Blaney, and Kevin Harvick. Now you're going to have, Jones and then the Dillon brothers and then possibly Blaney, because some of the Cup guys, they're already focusing on the Cup Series championship as of right now. So the way I think about this round in the Xfinity Series, yes, of course the Cup drivers, they're going to end up winning the races, and this is pretty much how the Xfinity guys are going to make it in based on points whatsoever, because we saw that last year, when we had Keselowski winning, and then of course we had Kyle Busch winning, and that was basically the rule that NASCAR pretty much said, okay, now we have to put a limit to the Cup guys on how many Xfinity races are running, and now we have to take a look at the playoff races, because if you looked at last year, mostly Kyle Busch won all of the playoff races last year. And now next year, with the Cup guys only running 7 races and then not running any of the playoffs and the Final Four, I really think that this can give the Xfinity guys a chance, to win races, to be up front, to finish in the top 5, and then of course trying to make themselves in, either a win or pointing themselves in. But I probably say going back in November, it's going to be very, interesting. But not a lot of Cup guys, but I do expect all the Xfinity regulars to run up front.
You're right about that. Some of the news you broke this week, before we tackle the Monster Cup Energy Series at Kansas was that Darrell Wallace Jr. has been pegged to replace Eric Almirola in the 43 for Richard Petty Motorsports. I think this is a great move. In reading the article earlier, Bubba, as most people call him, knows he's an aggressive driver, knows that there's a lot he can do to make himself up, to carve himself a niche on the Cup Series. And like he says in this article, it barely put a dent in what you need to bring to the Cup Series, speaking of his 4 starts this year. All I had to do was run 20th, and I'm like, holy cow, I did it. He had an 11th place finish in Kentucky, if you remember, which for a guy in his first 4 or 5 starts is great. That's fantastic. You don't really see rookies who do a limited run finish in the top 15. So for him, this is amazing. He's going to do well. I think this is really what it's going to take to put RPM back in that conversation of elite teams.
To be honest, I really think that, I did expect, Bubba to replace Eric Almirola in the 43 car. I knew this was coming, I'd probably say within the last 4 months, because if you remember, he was subbing for Eric Almirola, when he had that back injury whatsoever. So I think he only ran like 5 races back between June and July. And then once he had that 11th place finish at Kentucky, that was when, RPM decided, okay, like, do you think, we should have this kid running full time? And do you think this kid would be good enough, to finish in the top 5 or win races? And then once he won the truck race at Michigan when he was driving for MDM Motorsports, that's when, they decided, okay, I really think this kid, could be capable enough of winning races, finishing in the top 5. So why don't we add him on our team, next year? And I'm actually really excited, that Bubba's going to be racing in the Cup Series and going to be racing for a team, next season. And just remember this, he was racing for Kyle Busch Motorsports in the Truck Series for the last couple of years. And I guess he was the first African-American to win since Wendell Scott did it back in 1963 when he won at Jacksonville. So we're actually going to have an African-American in the Cup Series for like the first time in like decades. And to be honest, like, we really need like more like ethnicity drivers, in our sport, whether in Xfinity or in the Truck Series or in the Cup Series, we need that. And I think with Bubba, I think it's going to bring a lot of talent, but not only that, it's going to bring a lot of like, African Americans that are going to want to follow the sport, that are going to follow, Bubba Wallace, and, he's won a couple races in the Truck Series. And I really think this kid's going to do good in the Cup Series. But now the question is, what are we going to do about a sponsor? Because just remember, Smithfield is going to Stewart-Haas Racing next year. So that's going to be the one thing the team's going to have to focus on next year is, who the full-time sponsor is going to be.
Right. And as I'm looking through this article that you shared with us earlier this week, there is no mention of sponsorship. And we already know that Smithfield is backing Almirola, or no, he's going to SHR, which I think Almirola is going to end up in the 10. That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. That you're going to see Eric Almirola take Danica Patrick's seat next year. But everything you said is 100% true. We need more diversity on every level of NASCAR racing. The trucks have had it. We've had it in the Xfinity Series this year with Daniel Suarez coming up years earlier with Juan Pablo Montoya. But those were just, I don't want to say one-offs, but it's just one guy. And then having Danica get a seat. So now you have the diversity, not only ethnically, but gender-wise. So to have Bubba Wallace coming up full-time next year for RPM, this is going to open the door for a lot more people, not just to follow racing more. And we saw in New Hampshire, and I see every year there's more and more ethnic backgrounds in the stands every year. And I think that's fantastic. I think it's wonderful. But now a little boy or a little girl can sit somewhere and say, the only difference between me and Bubba Wallace is that he's driving that car. That's something for me to work for. You don't just have to follow if you have a sports mind. You don't just have to have dreams of the NBA, the NFL, what have you. You can now dream this dream. And I can't think of a better person to do this than Bubba Wallace.
Absolutely. There's just no question about it.
So as we move forward into the chaotic Cup Series this weekend at Kansas, wow, is where I'm going to begin. I'm very, very curious to hear what you have to say about Kansas, not just what we were texting back and forth about, but what was the biggest takeaway from Kansas?
So if you really think that, and I was kind of like optimistic, like, the reason, NASCAR was putting the elimination race for Kansas for 2017. But what I saw on Sunday, there was a lot of like surprises, but not only that, there was a lot of like things that, that you've never seen, like, at Kansas stuff, and, going to like the big wreck. And then pretty much, there were some really big names that got eliminated. First and foremost, like, I was actually surprised that Kyle Larson, had that blown engine and took himself out. And I was thinking about that, and I said, literally the second fastest driver of the season blows an engine, and that's it for his championship. So now he's eliminated for the next round. But the one thing that kind of questioned me was when on the restart, when Martin Truex Jr. was penalized for changing lanes on the restart. And I was actually looking at the replays a couple times, and apparently he dipped his tires below the white line. So I thought to myself, okay, this is kind of weird. I've never seen a penalty like this, where a driver dips his tires below the white line. Apparently that's NASCAR's call of, you can't change lanes before you pass the start finish line. But the one thing that kind of questioned me the most was, why wasn't the 4-car penalized? Because his tires were dipping below the white line as well. And then you go back to one of the quotes that Steve O'Donnell wrote last week, or this past week. He said, "We had some discussions with some of the competitors on Sunday morning about the fact that not necessarily just the inside lane, but if the inside car dropped below the white line, it would force potentially the outside row or one of the drivers in the outside row to change lanes, and the fear of being penalized. We asked to see if we could clarify that. That was why the language was put in place in the drivers' meeting, clearly communicated by Richard Buck, to stay above the white line. It was the first row of the drivers that sat at that line, so anyone who was following them was going to be put in a tough position because they had to stay in the line. So that was why the penalty was called for Truex and not the drivers that dropped below behind Truex," unquote.
Mm-hmm. It's follow the leader. And they said it briefly on the broadcast because I know one of the pit guys brought it up. They were speaking to the 78 team, and they were wondering, well, if we got it, why didn't Harvick? And the answer is simple, and we didn't have to go to a rule book or anything. It was clearly explained that it's the leader that can't do it.
Right.
Because all you're looking at, if you're Harvick and you're in that third spot and you're behind Truex, all you're paying attention to is the back end of the 78. Where is he going to go? What's he going to do? He's looking sometimes 2 steps ahead. Where am I going to make my move? So you're watching that car intently. If he dips, you dip. And you automatically assume, you hear your spotter, green, 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 you're going. But you don't know where you are yet because you're so focused on the back end of that car, you don't know if you've crossed the start-finish line or what have you. So easily, I could see why the 78 team was upset, but once the rule gets explained, like you just did, you know that it's not feasible. And there were a lot of people online, message boards, fan sites, etc., not only getting on Truex's case, and we'll get to that more in a little bit, for the way he just absolutely took that penalty like a champ and came back to win the race.
Right.
But there are also people saying, well, Harvick's the golden boy. He never gets penalized. And I'm thinking to myself, watch any given race. These top drivers, anybody in the playoffs, they're watching like a hawk. Matt Kenseth being a perfect example. He's on the clock. He goes in. The rule is 6 over the wall. He had 7.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is you and I were texting back and forth, and I'm watching this because somebody else just got popped for it a few weeks ago, too many men over the wall, while they're on the repair clock. And as soon as they turned the camera to Kenseth, I counted. And I'm like, oh, shit, here it comes. Right. He's done. He's done. They're going to park him. And it wasn't any further than that. Then they put up the graphic with the countdown of the 7 guys. And he got the call. You got to come in, park the car. You're done. 7 guys over the wall. We've warned you teams over and over again that you can't do this. And, again, the crew chief says, I thought I said 6. what you think and what actually happened, unfortunately, are two different things because you're in the heat of the battle. You're right there. You are live in this Hollywood Casino 400. If an extra guy goes over the wall and you don't catch it, that's on you, crew chief. That is not on Matt Kenseth. It's not on the crew member. It's on you. You're the boss.
Yeah. I mean, if you go back to before the big wreck and before that caution came out, there was actually one caution. I think Jimmy Johnson did a pit stop, and what I actually noticed was that he had seven people over the wall himself. But this is what the difference was. So the difference was the seventh man came over that wall only to tear off the windshield. That was about it. But now you go to the Matt Kenseth pit stop. His was a lot different because they were put on the crash clock, which was 5 minutes, to fix it. And then, of course, that other crew member that came over the wall, he was kind of thinking to himself, like, okay, should I go over the wall? Should I not? And he came over with one of that drill saw or whatever it was. And right when he came over to fix the car, that's when NASCAR said, okay, you have 7 people over the wall. You're penalized. That's it. Bring the car into the garage. You're done. And that basically just ruined Matt Kenseth's championship hopes. And anybody who's a Matt Kenseth fan, yeah, of course, they're already upset, after that one call. And actually my reaction to that was, I was kind of surprised myself, but what I've learned is, the rules are the rules, and that's what NASCAR is going to give out. And I agree with what you said. If you catch one of the crew guys over the wall, if you have 7 instead of 6, that's basically on you.
And everybody has a headset, much like you and I do here, where you can call back and say, hey, Fred, get back over this wall. You're not supposed to be out there. It's all on you. I can tell you one person who was very happy with the way things went this weekend, and that's this little Martin Truex fan right here who's getting ready to go to bed. So say hello to NASCAR land. Say hello to NASCAR land.
MTJ.
Are you going to speak, or are you just going to stand there and stare?
MTJ all the way.
Okay.
Champion 2017.
Go to bed, sweetie. I mean, going back to your point, sorry, she's just getting ready to go to bed. Okay. Hey, NASCAR guys, you got to see her. That's a little Martin Truex fan right there. It goes back to, like, with me for baseball, you don't fire the manager when the team doesn't do well. You get new players.
Right.
If I've long said this, there are certain managers that, yes, you fire because he can't do the right thing. But if the team loses, Joe Girardi's not out there playing for the Yankees, and Bill Belichick is not out there playing for the Patriots. They put the wheel in motion. It's up to the player to execute. The 20 crew, basically killed his championship hopes. Killed it. There's no other way to look at it. And if I were Matt Kenseth, he's on his way out of that team anyway. I'm sure he's going to land somewhere. I know we talked about RCR or wherever. Wherever Matt Kenseth goes, if it were me, I would say you need to put together a crew. They don't have to be stellar, but they don't all have to be green rookies. But I want to make sure that they all know intrinsically that their performance directly affects my performance. And I don't ever believe in these crew chief swaps that we see sometimes midseason where the 4 and the 41 will change teams, or the 10 and the 14 will change teams. It doesn't change anything. You're all under the same umbrella. You're all the same team. You start with the guys, you end with the guys. That's just me. But make sure you have a crew out there that knows hopes your livelihood, and by proxy their livelihood, is directly affected by the dumb mistakes or the success that you have week to week.
Absolutely.
So none of us picked really well this week. I think you had, I don't remember who you had.
I had Truex's favorite.
Of course you did. I shied away from it. I went with Harvick. He finished 9th. I had Dale Jr. as my sleeper. He finished 7th. Just to run down the top 10, it was Martin Truex in 1st. Kurt Busch came in 2nd. Ryan Blaney 3rd. Chase Elliott was 4th. Denny Hamlin 5th. Chris Buescher snuck in a 6th-place spot.
Yeah.
7th was Dale Jr. 8th was Harvick. 9th was Eric Almirola. And 10th was Kyle Busch. Other notables that we need to talk about: Jimmy Johnson with an 11th-place victory. Brad Keselowski 13th. Moving down the list, and some of these were heartbreakers. Joey Logano 21st. You had Ricky Stenhouse, 29th. Ryan Newman, 33rd. Eric Jones, 35th. Daniel Suarez, 36th. Kenseth, we just spoke about, 37th. Kyle Larson, because of his engine trouble, came home 39th and basically lost his spot in the championship.
I was surprised.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I mean, surprised covers it to an extent. But like you mentioned earlier, and I really don't want to steal your thunder because you said it. If not swapping places with Truex all year, this is one of the 2 fastest cars all year long. It was the Kyle and Martin show all year long.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, what we said last week coming out of Talladega came true. All it takes is that one bad day, and everything is gone.
Yep.
This happened a week ago at Talladega, and he has a decent race at Kansas. Yeah, he dropped some spots. He's not going to be sitting pretty in second, but he's still going to be there. This was just bad luck at a bad time during a bad race that was marred with stupid problems, marred with crazy penalties, marred with crashes. Every time you turned around, somebody was eating the wall or taking 8-9 guys out.
And I would probably say the big wreck with 67 laps to go, that one kind of, really just widened my eyes just a little bit because, when Erik Jones's car went up on 2 wheels, almost flipped over, like, I just said to myself, like, there's just no way a crash like that could happen that big. I mean, like, if you go back to the crash that Eric Almirola had, I mean, yeah, he basically slid right through the oil because he couldn't stop. And then you go back to the one this past Sunday, when Erik Jones got loose coming off the second corner and then he shot right up against the wall coming on the backstretch, I said to myself, this is not good. It's going to take out a lot of guys. And sure enough, he got hit by the 19 of Suarez, and then a lot of other guys, got hit after they checked up and everything. But that's the great thing that NASCAR does is safety. They protect these drivers every single weekend. And, NASCAR comes up with a really great way, of protecting these drivers. And, with all the safety of it, innovations that have come out, whether if it's the new car, the safer barrier, whatever, like, that's what I'm really impressed of. And how Erik Jones walked away from that accident, I have no idea. But, it's just, seeing the replay like over and over again, like, the way that 77 car took a hard lick to the wall and then have another car like hit him, it was just unbelievable.
Oh, yeah, and like you said, with the safety, every time, and it's been ingrained in me since I started watching NASCAR, is when they show the wreck and they show the car sitting there, I just want to see the net drop. So the minute I see the window net drop, he could have 2 busted legs and ribs hanging out. As long as I see that window net drop, I can breathe. And I don't have any ties to Erik Jones or any of these guys, really, except for a little sweat equity and buying some gear every year. So I don't want to see anybody hurt. To see the window nets drop, to see the improvements in safety, I love all people who don't watch NASCAR on a regular basis ask about the roof flaps. Now with the hood flaps, I think that's a great idea because it certainly pushes the car back down so you don't have a rollover, so you don't have somebody going airborne, so you don't have somebody die.
Right.
So great on them. But the one thing that I took away from this myself is, we spoke about it briefly, was Truex gets the penalty. He had a little bit of a tire problem.
Yeah.
It's constantly being shoved to the back. Not his fault. Well, the penalty, yes, your fault, Martin. Your fault, whoever your spotter is. That's your fault. But you battled back. He was easily at any given moment in time 3 miles an hour faster than anyone else out there. And that's in dirty air. And once he got into clean air, he lost some of that punch. You saw that he wasn't at any given point in time like 9-10 seconds ahead, second or two here and there. I was very much watching the crawler at the top of the screen, watching the intervals, because Harvick was having a great run. He led for a little while. Kyle Busch was having a great run. He was up there. And to see the intervals, when you see Truex plowing through the field, at one point 10 seconds back, and 2 laps later he's only 8 seconds back, and then he's like a fisherman. He's looking at the next car and he's reeling them in. But when he got out front, it seemed like a lot of his oomph was gone, and he was just, I don't want to say riding around. He was certainly strong, but he wasn't as strong by himself than he was when he was in traffic.
And it just goes to show you that, the 78 team, they've just been so dominant, whenever it comes to the 1.5-mile racetracks this year. And, you go to Texas in 2 weeks, that's going to be a 1.5-mile racetrack, and everybody's going to want to pick the 78, to win that race. But think about it this way. They've won 7 races this year. They have the most stage points. They got the most stage wins. I mean, they've racked up like almost everything like out of the book. In fact, they're pretty much the only team this year that figured out, the way to win stage races, the way to pick up stage points and whatsoever. Because some of these guys, like I would say 38 other guys, like they were trying to figure this whole thing out. I mean, you had some of them did, but I would say not a lot as what the 78, learned this season. But I would have to say that, for them to win the race after their crew member, Jim Watson, died on Saturday night from a heart attack. I mean, that, you could just basically see the emotion from the crew guys after they won that race. Like, they pretty much won for him. And, and I thought that was really special that they did that and stuff. But other than that, I really think that this team, they're just the team to beat as of right now. And I would have to say this over and over again, like, they're basically, this is basically their championship to lose. And I would have to say that the only way that they're going to have to lose this championship is they're going to have to outbeat themselves. And yep. I don't see this team outbeating themselves this year.
You're about to be attacked by a giant fuzzy creature, my friend.
Oh, don't worry about it. That's my cat. She could be the devil sometimes.
I've got 2 of them here, man. I understand that. Going back to Truex and the stage racing, a lot of these guys came up with different variations of heat racing. I know in Wisconsin, where Matt Kenseth's from, if you take the pole, you start in the back.
Yeah.
You're the fastest car. Now you have to prove it. Get through traffic. Harvick in California came up through heat racing. Joey Logano here in Middletown, heat racing. But once you get so ingrained in the start-to-finish aspect of NASCAR, whether it's the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, Camping World Truck Series, before stage racing, their focus was get the most out of my tires, most out of the engine, most out of fuel mileage, start the race, finish the race, bring it home in one piece. Now you have different strategies, and you're right. The Truex team, that's 78, Furniture Row, they figured it out before everybody else. Now everybody's playing catch-up to the point where, is it too late for them to catch up?
I would say for some drivers, it might be, but I would have to just wait and see, like, with this round, to see what happens, between now and going into Phoenix. Because, like I said, with this whole stage racing, it's a whole different ball game because everybody has to get those stage points, in order, to make the playoffs. And then pretty much in the playoffs, it'll just determine like whether if you're in the next round or not. And then of course stage wins. Yeah, that's a really big factor as well. But I would have to say, with Truex, I mean, it's not too late for him, but it might be late for some of the other guys. Like, if you have one bad race and, what if you get caught up in their crash, or if you have that whole pit road mishap like what Matt Kenseth did? I mean, your day's over. But I would just have to say we'll just have to see what happens, between now and Phoenix.
Yep. So let's run down the round of 8 that we are now entering into for the Monster Energy Cup Series. Chase Elliott sits in 8th. He's 63 points back. Ryan Blaney 7th, 60 points back. Denny Hamlin 6th, 55 points back. Jimmy Johnson is 5th, 52 points back. Locked in a virtual tie with 4th place driver Kevin Harvick, 52 points back. Brad Keselowski runs 3rd, 43 points back. Kyle Busch, 2nd, 27 points back, and obviously Martin Truex is your leader. Before we talk about the Cup Series in Martinsville, there's one person on this list that I want to ask you about. We haven't talked much about him insofar as does he have the juice to make the Final Four, and that's Ryan Blaney. Consistently finishing where he needs to finish, trying to get these wins, his head above water. In these 3 races, do you think Blaney can make a push for the Final Four? Whether or not he's in your pick set or not, can Blaney do enough to make that Final Four?
I would say, he's going to be pretty much my dark horse, in this playoffs. And, I was actually impressed that he finished 3rd at Kansas this past Sunday. But, I mean, do I see him going to the Final Four? I mean, it's possible, but I just don't know. I mean, it's kind of like 50-50 as of right now. But I would say, like, the one race the one race I would definitely put my eye on the 21 car is definitely going to be Texas, because if you look at the race back in April, they led 152 laps. They won the 2 stages, but they wasn't able to win the race. But that's going to be the one race where I'm going to be keeping my eye on with this 21 team. And if you look at the results this year, I mean, of course they got the win at Pocono, but they've had 4 top 5s and 12 top 10s. I mean, it's pretty good out of him, but you look at his playoff results. 11th at Chicago, 9th at New Hampshire, 23rd at Dover, 8th at Charlotte, 18th at Talladega, and 3rd at Kansas. So I would have to say that, this is going to be a team that, I'm going to be keeping my eye on. And not only that, the fact that they're affiliate with Team Penske, but I mean, it's kind of 50-50, whether if I see them in the Final Four. But I would have to say if Blaney has a strong start at Martinsville and then throughout the next 2 races in the playoffs, I really think this is going to be a team that could lock themselves into the Final Four depending on what the other 7 drivers do.
Very good call. So let's talk about Martinsville. Xfinity Series is off, so the trucks and the Cup are going to be taking over Virginia in Martinsville Speedway, starting with the Truck Series. A lot of these guys come up into the Truck Series with a dirt track background. We talked about Christopher Bell earlier, and Martinsville being very small, very flat. It's the paper clip. A lot of the dirt track experience that you have, taking that corner as tight as you do, and sometimes losing your ass end in the process, as the front end is biting and the back end is sliding away from you, it lends itself to dirt track style racing. What are you looking at for Martinsville insofar as the Truck Series?
So I would say with Martinsville, it's also going to be another wild card in the playoffs because, like I said, it's a short track. It's beating and banging, and it's one of those tracks where you're definitely going to have to save brakes, because if you do not have any good brakes at the end, that's going to cost you, winning the race. And, we're also going to see a lot of, side-by-side, and of course, what we actually call back in the old days the bump and run as well. But the one thing that you have to keep your eye on is restarts, because with restarts, everybody's going to want to get that bottom really quick, because if you don't get that bottom going into turn 3 or turn 1 whatsoever, you're just going to be hung up on the outside, trying to find your way, like to sneak down on the inside to get to that bottom pretty quick. But I would have to say with Martinsville, whoever has a really good car and whoever has that short track mentality, like we've seen out of some of these Truck Series drivers and the Cup Series drivers, I mean, they could possibly, get a win and hopefully clinch themselves into the Final Four.
And when it comes to my picks, I think that you're going to see that that's my mentality right here, is that obviously my lock is going to be Christopher Bell. Much like Martin Truex, the Truck Series and the Cup Series are really mirroring each other in so much as the leaders are very strong. Yes, bad luck can happen, and yes, they could fall down, but we're still waiting for Bell to fall down. We're still waiting for Martin Truex to fall down. But Christopher Bell is my lock, and my sleeper is someone who is entrenched in that championship run still, but a win will definitely put him in a really good position. My sleeper this week is Austin Cindric.
It's good picks. So my lock, and I'm actually going to be doing a different one this time, is definitely going to be the 21 of Johnny Sauter. If you look at his results, short track guy, he won at Martinsville a couple times, including this race last year to make it into the Final Four. And I really think that Saturday is definitely going to be a Johnny Sauter type of race, because we've seen how he's done at Bristol, how he's done at Martinsville within the past couple of years, winning races, and having that short track mentality. And I really think that, Sauter can have a shot at making it into the Final Four, with this win on Sunday. And my sleeper pick, now, he hasn't been in the Truck Series for a little bit of a while, but it's definitely going to be the 99 of Cale Gale. So if you remember him, he used to race in the Xfinity Series when he was driving for Kevin Harvick's team, and then of course he drove in the Truck Series, the 33 truck. I forget what the team owner was at that time, but actually, if you guys don't know this, Gale actually has a Truck Series win at Homestead back in 2012. And Chris, a little bit of a trivia question for you. So when
Sure.
Cale Gale won the race at Homestead back in November, who finished second?
Oh, you're killing me because again, I'm not much of a follower of this. My guess would be Kyle Busch.
Correct.
Okay, then.
And that finish, and I remember that finish too. That was when they were battling side by side in the checkered flag. And it was kind of like that finish that you saw at Darlington in 2003, where they were like close together, like neck and neck, and then Gale ended up beating Kyle Busch to the line.
Okay. I know Kyle Busch does a lot with his Truck Series team. He's very hands-on. I think that's great about him, that he is very involved. But again, I'm going to go back to the old sentiment that I have. And again, that's part of being, I'll be honest, an old guy. Ship on the highest level, leave the lower levels alone.
Yeah.
But when you own the team, sometimes, yeah, get in, drive the car, do a one-off, do a three-off, but don't run an entire series. Don't take the spotlight away. But when you have, and this is where I'm going to give a little praise, when you have Kyle Busch get into a Truck Series, when you have the Kevin Harvicks and the guys like that go down to the Xfinity Series for a few races, that puts extra butts in the seats. And as many times as you can get an ass every 18 inches, you're making money. Not just the racetrack, but the teams are making money. One of the things I have a problem with, and I would love to see more of it, but I know there's only so much space on that outside in Merchandise Alley, or when they have Gimmick Village is what I call it, the Fanatics Village that they have. We need more merchandise for the Xfinity and for the Truck Series.
I agree.
Need to have people show their support for these guys. So now that we've gotten our truck gimmick out of the way, let's look at the Cup Series at Martinsville. It's first race of the round of 3 for the round of 8.
Yeah.
There's too many rounds. We're just going to have names for these like they used to have. Challenger, Contender, Championship, what have you. I'll let you get your picks out of the way first because I'm going to shock the world.
So this one, I was doing a lot of thinking on this. And you think about Martinsville on the Cup side, I mean, there were some drivers who I was kind of having a hard time of picking, but my lock on Sunday is definitely going to be Jimmy Johnson. The reason why, and of course, when you think about Martinsville, you think about, how many times Hendrick Motorsports has won at that racetrack. And I was actually looking at Johnson's results. If you think about it, with this next round coming up, he has 9 wins at Martinsville, 7 wins at Texas, and 4 wins at Phoenix. So this actually was giving me a lot of thinking. I said, okay, if Jimmy Johnson is going to make it to the round of 4, I think his best track to win is definitely going to be Martinsville. If not, I would have to say Texas or Phoenix, because those are the only tracks that he's been dominant on. And keep in mind, this was a tough pick for me to choose because, I was either going to go with him or I was going to go with the 11 to Denny Hamlin because Hamlin, has ran pretty successful at Martinsville, and I think he's only won like 5 races there within the past couple of years. So that's going to be my lock for Sunday. And my sleeper pick, is going to be Kyle Weatherman. So he's going to be making his Cup Series debut driving the 51 car for Rick Ware Racing, and I think he's an ARCA Series guy. So that's going to be one sleeper for me to watch. So that's going to be my picks for this weekend.
All right, very good picks. I also took Jimmy Johnson as my lock for a lot of the same reasons you just brought up. He's dominant at Martinsville. When I think of Phoenix, obviously I think of the Desert Dominator, the closer Kevin Harvick. When I think of Texas, there are a lot of names I'll throw out there, but again, Jimmy Johnson is one that comes to mind, being a multiple winner there. This is where we talked about Jimmy Johnson sneaking in, so to speak, into this round. We talked about Kyle Larson having his bad luck, falling backward and losing out on his championship run. This is a race that Jimmy Johnson absolutely positively has to win to tell the world, I'm still here. I'm still a 7-time champ. I'm still trying to gain that 8th championship and cement myself into the record books, the Hall of Fame, to be in that conversation when they say Petty, Earnhardt, Johnson. Because right now, It's those three. But it's if he does what he knows he can do, using Martinsville as the jump-off point, Johnson then becomes name number one.
Yeah.
Not that I would like that. We all know how I feel about Jimmy Johnson, but you can't deny his talent. My sleeper, it's easy. I already told you my sleeper for the rest of the season is Dale Earnhardt Jr. because I'd like to see him win one on the way out. And now we're going to talk a little bit about, you and I had texted over the weekend about who we thought right now, as we sit, who the final four were going to be now we've lost Kyle Larson to elimination. So walk me through your final four.
So my final four, I was doing a lot of thinking about this the last few days, and since I said to myself, okay, now Kyle Larson's out, who do you think is going to be my final four this time? So there's actually two ways, or a couple ways that, you know, I'm thinking about who my final four is going to be. So my first one is definitely going to be the 78, the 18, the 4, and the 2. So that's pretty much my first pick. And then my second pick is definitely going to be the 78, the 18, the 48, and the 2. And keep this in mind, you know, with this round, I mean, it's going to be very interesting to see who makes it in on wins and who points their way in. But there's a lot of good names that are in that list that could potentially take that final four spot. And, you know, and I look at Jimmy Johnson right now, I mean, he's got a 50% chance of making it into the final four, you know, with all these racetracks that are really good to him coming up. You know, it won't even surprise me quite a bit if he makes it to the championship four. And it wouldn't surprise – it would surprise me if he would beat Martin Truex Jr., the dominant driver of the season, to win the championship this year. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this will all play out. And I look at it, you know, a lot of these drivers within the next 3 weeks, they're going to take a lot of risks and a lot of chances. And, you know, some of these guys, you know, they're just going to have to think outside the box the way that this round's going to shape up. And, you know, there's just no words I could pretty much say, but, you know, hopefully, you know, we'll get to see, you know, Truex and Kyle Busch and Johnson, those guys battle it out for the championship this year.
Absolutely. And I looked at a lot of the same things you looked at. Obviously, the 78 is in my final four, but I look at these three tracks. Even though I picked Jimmy Johnson as my lock to win this week, I don't. If he wins, he's in. We know this. But my final four looks a little different. And in no particular order, I have Martin Truex Jr., I have Kyle Busch, I have Kevin Harvick, and I have Denny Hamlin. Because these races really do cater to their styles going forward. You mentioned Hamlin as part of your Martinsville critique and what you think we're going to see. So I see big things. And I think I said this to you when I sent you those picks, and you're like, wow, did not even think about Denny Hamlin.
Right.
One of the best things about finishing the season at Homestead Miami Speedway is that while it's similar to some of the tracks on the circuit, it's different. And you only go there once a year, the last race. So no one really has an advantage going in.
Absolutely.
Everybody, those final four go in with the same clean slate. It's all about what you've done in the garage. Did you unload good? Did you make adjustments during the practice period? And how you roll off on race day. So for me, I mean, am I being a little bit of a homer when I pick Kevin Harvick? Sure I am. But I also know that the second to the last race is a race that when you think Phoenix and you're a NASCAR fan, you think the 4 car.
Yeah.
Before that, you thought the 29 when he was in that car. Kyle Busch, you can't count out. He has shown it. He has had rough patches throughout the season, and he keeps staying close to the top. Anyone who thinks that the 18 is not going to be there come Miami, you might be a little crazy. The 11 will sneak in. Denny Hamlin is definitely going to sneak in. With the loss of Kyle Larson to elimination, it changed up my picks a little bit because the 11 wasn't there. It was the 42. I still had the top 3, Truex, Harvick, Busch, but I had Kyle Larson. Changed everything.
Yeah.
If the roles were reversed, and Larson won that race, and Truex had the bad day. Truex had enough of a cushion where he could have stayed in, like you said, with the wins, with the stage points, with everything he's earned and gotten that cushion, he would have made it. There was nothing he could have done to fall out this round. but things would have been different. Kyle Larson would definitely be in this conversation right now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I look at Kyle Larson. I mean, yeah, if he would have won the race, I mean, he could have made it into the next round. And let's say, like, if Kyle Larson did make the round of 8, I would have had him winning at Texas because, you look at the race back in April, he was one of the cars that, that was catching the 48, but he just couldn't catch him in time. And he was one of those guys that ran pretty well in the mile and a half whatsoever. And actually, to be honest, it really changed my picks too, because, once Kyle Larson was out, I said, okay, now this kind of opens the door to Jimmy Johnson because, if he wins at either Martinsville, Texas, or Phoenix, he makes it into the championship 4. But if Hamlin would have won at Martinsville, he could have made it in as well. Now, for Kyle Busch, the only way I could see him making it into the Final 4 is he could possibly win at Phoenix, because you go back to the race in March where he led pretty much most of the race, and there was a late caution that came out with 6 laps to go that forced the race into overtime, which was back then the overtime line was at the backstretch, but not anymore. So had that late caution not come out, Kyle Busch could have won that race, to make the playoffs pretty early. But, I would have to say with the 18 team, I think this is going to be their only shot, to try and win at one of these racetracks and, to try and not afford to have a bad finish. And even if they have one bad race, they're just going to have to win at the next 2. And then if they have 2 bad races, then they're going to have to win at Phoenix, with all the other guys in between. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting, these next 3 weeks, but I'm very, excited to see like who these 4 drivers are going to be battling for the championship.
Absolutely. And we did it at the last round. We did it with the trucks, and I'm going to go back to the standings real quick. Of the 8 that are currently in the Monster Energy Series Cup race playoffs, we've already have our picks for 4. Is there a sleeper that could potentially turn everybody on their ear and push out a Jimmy Johnson, a Kevin Harvick, a Brad Keselowski?
I would have to say the only sleeper right now in this playoffs is definitely going to be Chase Elliott. And the reason why I'm saying this is because, the only mile and a half racetrack we have is Texas. And we all saw what Chase Elliott did at Charlotte back a couple weeks ago when he finished second. And keep this in mind, I think they have like a 50% chance of winning a race this year, but I do expect this team to make a lot of noise, come playoff time. And, I look at his results from Martinsville back in the spring. He had a 3rd place finish, which was pretty good for him. So, and then you look at his playoff results. They're pretty decent, considering the fact that his only worst finish so far in the playoffs has been 16th at Talladega. But I do expect this team to clinch a lot more top 5s, if not, maybe possibly get a win to clinch himself in the Final 4. And I would be really surprised if the 24 team makes the Final 4 at Homestead and possibly win the championship. And, in my opinion, but that's pretty much my only sleeper I'm going to be keeping an eye on in this playoffs. And if not, I'd have to say, Blaney or anybody else.
Yeah, in my opinion, I know I have him on my list, but right now Denny Hamlin can make a lot of problems for a lot of these guys by picking up a win or consistently being top 5 going down the stretch here. Blaney, maybe. Chase Elliott, without question, could change a lot of the complexion of the Final 4. Given, let's say he picked up his first win this weekend in Martinsville. Is it possible? Sure. Is it probable? In my opinion, not so much. I don't think Chase Elliott and Martinsville are 2 names that I readily look at and I can put together, regardless of his success on the Xfinity Series at that racetrack. But Denny Hamlin, again, is just a guy that if you count him out, you're crazy, much like Kyle Busch, much like Kevin Harvick. It's a true X world right now. We're all just kind of wondering who's going to come up and be the spoiler.
Without a doubt.
So as we wind this down, I want to remind everybody that if you have not gotten your Star Wars tickets, it is opening in just a month and a half. Go to LokiandJabroni.com, click on the Fandango link, buy your tickets now, and get a free poster when you buy from any one of the affiliate links from the Loki and Jabroni website. It not only saves you money sometimes. No hidden fees, no extra charges. They'll kick back a little bit to help us with production costs, not only for this show, but for the Loki and Jabroni show. And hey, let's help support each other, man. Let's do something good. What do you got to plug this week?
So, as usual, just follow me on Facebook at NASCAR IndyCar Central. We are on Twitter at NASCAR IndyCar. No, wait. Twitter at NASCAR Indy. Instagram at NASCAR IndyCar. And then make sure you visit my website, NASCARindy.org. I post up blogs, news, results, predictions, a whole lot more. Actually, my prediction is, so the World Series has started last night. We're already in Game 2. So my question is, who do you have in the World Series, and what's your prediction?
Who do I have, or who do I want to win? Two different questions.
Who do you want to win?
Houston, easily. AL. I'm an AL guy. I'm a Yankee fan, so I kind of keep my loyalty with the American League. I do think the Dodgers are very strong. I'm actually looking at the game now. Houston's up 1-0 in the top of the fourth, 2 on, 2 out, and Justin Verlander has a bat in his hand. So basically the inning's over. But I just think the Dodgers all year have proven that they are that good. Champions to make it here. The Cubs were really good all year.
Yeah.
So if you can beat the reigning and defending champion, your ticket is pretty much punched. But that's why they play 7 games and not 1 game.
Right.
I want Houston to win. That's my pick.
My pick is I got the Dodgers in 6 games, maybe 7.
Yeah, that's my educated pick as well. Dodgers in 6. Yeah. I don't think it'll go 7. But hey, we saw the Yankees take Houston to 7 games. We saw, we saw a lot of great baseball this season, and it's come down to this. And by the time you see us next Tuesday, not Wednesday, folks, we're going to be doing this on Tuesday night next week because of a schedule change with the other podcast. We might be talking about briefly World Series champion, fill in the name here.
That's right.
So I just have one thing to plug in conjunction with these podcasts that we do. We get a lot of great stuff from Viking Entertainment, who provides on the Loki and Jabroni show microphones, wires, etc. And they're big supporters of this show here on C J Speedway Review. This Saturday night at a place called Tokyo Sushi in Norwich, Connecticut, is their annual Halloween party. If you're in the area, if you want to take a little drive from Peabody, Massachusetts, and get yourself down to Norwich, Connecticut, come to the costume party, have a great time. Contests for, I believe it's the best costume, scariest costume, sexiest costume, what have you. It's always a fun time, and I always look forward to it, and I hope to see some of you there. And if you can't be there, there's going to be pictures up. Follow them on Facebook, Viking Entertainment DJ and Karaoke Services. They help the show out a lot. They're big supporters, and we couldn't do a lot of what we do without them. So big ups to them. So, Corey, another great week, and I'm very much looking forward to talking about the ins and the outs at the Paperclip of Martinsville this coming Tuesday night. Guys, if you're watching this from the link on Facebook, please be sure to go to our YouTube page and subscribe. You will get updates when the new shows are on. You can watch us do this live. And one day I'll open up the Facebook page right here, and we'll take questions. We're going to have a lot of time to fill after Miami in that 12 weeks without racing. What the hell are we going to do? Right. We got to do something. We'll open it up to questions. I did put up a question, and I want to read that comment before we go. And my question was, who possibly can take out the 78? Who can stop the path of rage, if you will? And as I'm scrolling through to find that post, in your opinion, if I had to ask you that question, who can stop the 78 from winning the championship?
It's definitely going to be the 18 of Kyle Busch, without a doubt.
I was going to say the same. But Jason Blue, who was a big racing fan, saw him in New Hampshire this year. How you doing, Jason? He also does a lot of work with Thompson Speedway here in Connecticut. His comment was, never count out Jimmy Johnson or Kyle Busch. Personally, I think the championship will come down to those 3. Jimmy Johnson knows how to win it late, and Kyle Busch, despite his problems recently, is still a proven winner. While it might seem difficult to dethrone Martin Truex right now, he hasn't won it yet. You still have to race good at Homestead, and just like an American football game, you can play well right up to that one game. But if you, but if you don't play that one game right, you may just have an upset. And that's his little tip of the hat to this past Super Bowl, which is exactly correct. You have to play your game, but you have to be better than everybody else. And all it takes is that one guy who's just a little bit hungrier than you are, and it's going to throw everything sideways.
Yeah.
So once again, thank you, Corey. Thank you guys for watching, and we will catch you next Tuesday right here on the C J Speedway Review.
Next Tuesday at 8. Good night, everybody.